Say a lie 3 times, and something strange happens inside your team's brain. It stops feeling like a lie. It starts feeling like a fact. Nobody voted on it. Nobody checked it. It just got repeated enough times that it crossed some invisible line. And now everyone treats it as settled. This is not a flaw in a few gullible people. It is a documented, physical shortcut, wired into how ordinary brains process language. And if you manage people, it is quietly running in every meeting, every Slack channel, and every town hall you have ever hosted, whether you notice it or not. Psychologists have a name for it: the illusory truth effect. It is not a theory. It was demonstrated experimentally back in 1977 by 3 researchers named Hasher, Goldstein, and Toppino. Their setup was simple, almost boring on paper. They handed people a set of statements. Some of the statements were true. Some were false. All of them were written to sound equally plausible. Nothing absurd, nothing obviously wrong. Just the kind of mid-level factual claim you would nod along to at a dinner party without fact-checking it. Then they repeated some of those statements to the same people, spaced out over several weeks. Not constantly, not in a manipulative barrage, just again, later, and again after that. Picture what that actually looked like for a participant. Week 1. You read through a list of statements and rate each one for how true it sounds. Some are things you already know. Some are things you have never thought about before, obscure-sounding trivia, the kind of claim that could plausibly be true or false, and you genuinely cannot tell which just from reading it. You rate them, and you move on with your life. Weeks later, you come back in, and you get another list. Some statements are brand new. Some are the exact same statements from before, mixed back in without any flag telling you, you have seen this one already. You are not told which is which. You are just asked, again, how true each one feels. Here is what they found. When people rated how true each statement felt, the repeated statements scored higher. Not because anyone had introduced new evidence. Not because anyone had explained why the statement was correct. The only thing that changed was how many times a person had encountered it before. Repetition alone did the work. Nothing else moved. And this is the part worth sitting with, because it is almost insulting to how we like to think of ourselves. The participants were not stupid, not careless, not unusually credulous. They were simply human, running the same mental hardware every human runs. Hearing something again, on its own, nudged their internal sense of "this is true" upward. No new facts required, no new argument made. So, why does a brain do that? Why would mere repetition move the needle on belief at all? The honest answer is that your brain is not actually built to run a full fact check on every sentence that enters it. That would be exhausting and slow, and you would never get through a normal day of meetings, messages, and hallway conversations. Instead, your brain runs on shortcuts, and one of the biggest shortcuts is this: familiar feels true. When your brain processes a sentence it has seen before, that processing happens more smoothly. There is less friction, less effort, less resistance. Cognitive scientists call this fluency, how easily a piece of information moves through your mind. And your brain, instead of asking, "Is this accurate?" quietly asks a much cheaper question instead. Does this feel easy to process? If the answer is yes, it treats that ease as a stand-in for accuracy. It is checking fluency, not checking facts. Ease gets mistaken for evidence every single time, without you noticing the substitution happen. Think of it like reading a page in a clean, familiar font versus a smudged, unfamiliar one. The content on both pages could be identical, word for word, but the clean page will feel more trustworthy to you, almost instinctively, simply because your brain is not laboring to decode it. A repeated claim works the same way inside a team. The 10th time you hear "the new client always pushes back on scope," your brain is not laboring over whether that claim is actually documented anywhere. It is gliding. And gliding gets misread, quietly and automatically, as knowing. Here is the part that actually makes this interesting to me. Not just curious. As a psychology footnote, it means confidence and repetition can counterfeit the exact internal feeling that real evidence produces. From the inside, a well-worn assumption and a well-proven fact can feel completely identical. You do not get a warning label. There is no little flag that pops up in your head saying, "You believe this because you have heard it a lot, not because anyone ever verified it." It just feels true, the same way a fact-checked truth feels true. That is what makes it genuinely dangerous in a team setting, where dozens of people are quietly cross-contaminating each other's sense of certainty every single day, often about things that actually matter: budgets, clients, headcount, strategy, and who said what to whom. Watch how this actually plays out at work, because none of it is abstract. A rumor about layoffs starts circulating through Slack. Maybe it began from one offhand comment, or a leader looking stressed in a hallway, or someone misreading a calendar invite that was really about something else entirely. Nobody confirms it. Nobody walks over to HR and asks directly. But it gets mentioned once in a DM, then again in a side channel, then a third time over lunch. By the third mention, something has quietly shifted. People are not treating it as a rumor anymore. They are treating it as something that has basically already happened, just not officially announced yet. Nobody re-earned that certainty with new information. It arrived entirely through repetition. And decisions start getting made around it. Someone quietly updates a resume. Someone stops volunteering for a new project. Someone gets cagey in a one-on-one, all built on a claim that was never actually verified, not even once, by anyone in the chain. Or take something more mundane, but arguably more expensive in the long run: a wrong assumption about a client. Someone says in a meeting, "This client is really price sensitive, we should discount." Maybe that was true once, or maybe it was just a guess that sounded reasonable at the time. Nobody checks the actual account history. But the line gets repeated in a second meeting. As background context, nobody questions. Then a third meeting, in passing, as an accepted premise, nobody bothers restating the source of anymore. By meeting 3, that assumption has graduated from someone's private hunch to institutional knowledge. Pricing strategy gets built around it. And if the original assumption was wrong, you now have a wrong belief carrying the full institutional weight of "everybody already knows this," which is a far harder thing to dislodge than any single person's original guess ever was on its own. There is a third, quieter version of this that shows up less in Slack drama and more in ordinary process. A best practice gets mentioned once in an onboarding doc, half remembered from somewhere. A new hire repeats it to the next new hire, because that is what they were told. 2 years later, it is simply "how we do things here," recited with total confidence by people who were never shown a reason for it, only shown the repetition. Nobody is lying at any point in that chain. Each person genuinely believes it, because by the time it reached them, it already felt fluent, already felt established, already felt like something that must have been checked at some point by somebody. It almost never was. And here is a detail that should genuinely worry anyone sitting in a leadership seat. This effect does not spare leaders. It does not spare you just because you are the one doing the talking. Say a growth projection enough times in town halls, and something happens to your own team's relationship with that number, they stop evaluating it. Not because they are lazy, but because the projection has become fluent. It glides. It no longer triggers the mental, "Wait, is this actually still accurate?" check, because that check requires friction, and repetition has slowly sanded the friction away. The unsettling implication is that a leader can talk themselves and their entire team into treating a stale or shaky number as bedrock truth, purely through the mechanics of saying it often, with zero new evidence ever entering the picture at any point. Nobody in that room is lying. Nobody is even being unusually credulous. It is simply the illusory truth effect, running exactly as advertised, at scale, on people who trust you by default. Now here is the part most people miss the first time they hear about this effect. They assume it is a story about being fooled by other people. It is not only. It is also a story about how easily you can fool your own team without meaning to, and even fool yourself, just by being consistent. You do not need to be dishonest to trigger this. You just need to be repetitive. Confidence and repetition, run through a room of tired, busy, well-meaning people often enough, produce the exact same felt sense of truth that actual verified facts produce. That is the twist worth taking seriously, instead of filing away as a fun psychology fact. The effect does not require a villain anywhere in the story. It only requires a schedule. None of this is new to the industries whose entire business model runs on it. Advertisers have exploited this for close to a century now. That is the actual mechanical reason slogans repeat, not because marketing departments ran out of creative ideas, but because repetition itself is the product being sold. Say a brand name enough times, next to enough plausible-sounding claims, and the claims start to inherit the same fluency-driven trust the brand name has already built up over years. Political campaigns use precisely the same lever, for precisely the same reason. Repetition is dramatically cheaper than evidence. You do not need a study, a citation, or a documented source. You just need a microphone and a schedule. And it works almost as well on smart, skeptical, educated people as it does on anyone else, which is the detail people find hardest to accept about their own minds. Intelligence does not inoculate you against fluency. It was never designed to. The shortcut lives well below the level where deliberate intelligence operates, in the fast, automatic layer of thinking, not the slow, checking one. So what do you actually do with this? As someone managing people, running meetings, briefing a team, or just trying not to get quietly steamrolled by your own department's rumor mill? The fix is not complicated, but it does require deliberately overriding a shortcut your brain would much rather keep using for free, because the shortcut is fast and checking is slow. First, stop letting a claim's importance, or its truth, get measured by how many times you have heard it. Frequency is not evidence. It never was. It only feels like evidence because of exactly the mechanism you now understand from the inside. Before accepting something as settled fact, a client preference, a market trend, a reason, a process exists, a number in a projection, ask where it actually came from, not how familiar it sounds, not how many people in the room nodded when it got mentioned again. Trace it back to an actual source, a document, a data point, a specific person who was actually there. If you cannot trace it, that itself is useful information. It tells you that what you are holding is not a fact at all. It is a well-worn assumption wearing a fact's clothing. Second, when you brief your team, do not just hand them conclusions and repeat those conclusions until they stick in everyone's head. That is literally training the illusory truth effect on your own people, even when your intentions are completely good. Show them the evidence underneath the conclusion instead. Let them see the actual data, the actual client history, the actual reasoning, not just the polished takeaway repeated at every stand-up, until it becomes fluent and unquestioned. A conclusion that arrives with its evidence attached is much harder to accidentally believe for the wrong reasons, and much easier to correctly revise later on when the underlying evidence eventually changes. Third, and this matters most for anything moving fast through informal channels, when a rumor starts circulating, kill it early, and kill it with a direct source, not a shrug or a "let's wait and see." Every single day, a claim repeats unchecked. It gets harder to dislodge even after you correct it, even after you produce the actual documented truth in front of everyone. That is not a guess. That is the same mechanism working in reverse. The false version has been banking fluency in people's heads with every repetition, and your one correction is not going to out-repeat all of that in a single meeting. You are not just fighting the original false claim anymore. You are fighting every single repetition of it that happened while nobody in charge was watching closely enough. There is a fourth habit worth building on top of those three, and it costs almost nothing. Periodically audit the things everyone knows on your team. Once a quarter, pick 3 widely accepted assumptions about a client, a market, a process, a competitor, and actually trace each one back to its origin, out loud, in front of the team that repeats it. You will find that some of them hold up fine, backed by real data nobody had bothered to recite recently. Fine, good. Now everyone has seen the receipt, instead of just inheriting the conclusion. But you will also find, more often than you would like, an assumption that traces back to nothing, a guess someone made 2 years ago that got repeated into permanence. Catching that costs you 20 minutes in a meeting. Not catching it costs you a pricing strategy, a hiring decision, or a product bet built on a foundation nobody ever actually poured. So the next time a rumor about layoffs starts drifting through your Slack, Or an assumption about a client gets repeated in a third meeting with nobody naming its actual source, or you catch yourself about to say a projection out loud for the fifth town hall in a row without rechecking whether it still holds stop for a second. Ask where it actually came from, because your team's brains, and honestly your own brain too, are not running a truth detector in the background. They are running a familiarity detector and quietly mistaking its output for the real thing. Say something enough times and it stops sounding like a claim and starts sounding like a memory of something that was always true. That is not conviction. That is just repetition, wearing conviction's face. I want to hear the version of this that actually happened on your team. Was it a rumor that outran the facts before anyone caught it? Or a wrong assumption that quietly hardened into common knowledge in a meeting nobody thought to question? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And honestly, the specific ways this shows up at real jobs are more interesting than the original psychology paper.